Welcome to ESG in Practice, where we turn environmental, social, and governance topics into practical, actionable steps.
I'm Anne, your guide to data-driven sustainability insights.
And I'm Abby, with 2 decades of hands-on experience in this field.
Together with our guests, we're unraveling the complexities of ESG, where we move this discussion away from glossary reporting
to make sustainability and compliance a real competitive advantage for your business.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to ESG in Practice. We are here today with our guest, Elisabet Sandnes. Hello, Elisabet. Thank you for joining us. Can you please give an introduction to yourself and maybe explain about your background and how you ended up at your current company, which is called Faerch?
My career has been a series of coincidences. I think I've always followed my heart, but it has been important for me to make sure that I use what I know in order to drive impacts. I've been lucky to work my entire career on the green side of things. First in renewable M&A banking, and then I went to TOMRA, where I spent 9 wonderful years. Then I had the chance to join Egon Zehnder to promote sustainable green leaders or to place leaders and cheering for the right people, and I absolutely love that. And now I'm in Faerch with enhancing the visibility on what we do on the sustainability side, and that's absolutely been a pleasure to join Faerch.
What are your current responsibilities at Faerch?
In Faerch, I'm a part of the exec management team. My functional responsibility is ESG, external affairs, branding, marketing, and communications. Basically, Faerch, for the listeners that don't know it, that's quite common because we are a B2B plastics packaging producer. We're delivering 24 billion pieces of plastics to 4,600 customers internationally. Through our 32 production sites across Europe, the branding you would see on the products in the store would not be Faerch. It would be the Unilever, Danone, Arla, Norsk Kylling for that matter. You're looking for that in Norway. The company, it has a track record back from 1970. It's headquartered in Denmark, and it's owned by AP Møller Holding as a part of their focused portfolio of companies with positive impact on society. In short, we are a food tray plastics producer. We're delivering food packaging within ready meals, within meats, or protein, food to go, and the dairy segment.
Elisabet, you are also a part of the executive management team at Faerch, and it is also the first Chief Sustainability Officer position at Faerch. Can you tell us, how did this come about?
It has been quite an interesting journey to follow. I knew Faerch from before, as I used to work with TOMRA, and Faerch has TOMRA equipment in the recycling plant. As the journey evolved for Faerch, sustainability is an integral part of the business model, right? So for them, it is definitely strategic. I saw that when I also talked with them, that this is basically the heart of what they do. There's a really genuine wish in order to take responsibility for the own product that is put on the market. And that was basically very, very interesting for me.
Elisabet, can you tell us a little bit about your career before this role?
I am finance educated and I started my days in banking. For me, it was important to stay on the green side of things. I worked 6 years with renewables banking. I had the pleasure of following the solar, wind and water market. I was all a bit premature perhaps at that time, but then I moved to TOMRA when I moved back to Norway. I had the pleasure of heading up M&A and investor relations. That was a very, very exciting time in TOMRA when the company was growing super quickly through M&A and also by organic growth, because it was almost like you pushed a button in 2017-ish where the world understood high resource efficiency was important. Being a part of the management team at the end, heading up group strategy and also sustainability, that was very interesting because for TOMRA, clearly the business model is built around sustainability. That's what drives it. And that's also how I ended up in Faerch, because obviously being circular for Faerch, making sure that the materials in our products come back from recycling and is getting used again is an integral part of the strategy. I've seen it on the bottle. I know that you can do a bottle-to-bottle loop. There's an obvious chance to do it also on food packaging and trays, because it's the same material. So it can be done and we have the technology. Yeah, super exciting to be a part of that journey.
Absolutely.
For me to understand a little bit better, can you explain what makes Faerch products different in the market? I understand that they are very much focused around sustainability, and to have a bit more details around what is the value that you guys add.
Put it into a big perspective. Every year, there's 106 billion pieces of food packaging being put onto the market in Europe. And Faerch is producing about 20% of that. So that's a massive part of that market. The average life of these items, they live for 8 days only. And if we look at PET plastics, which is also the materials that is used in bottles, it's high quality plastics. Unlike the plastics for the bottles, it comes back for recycling, right? But the food trays, they don't. It's truly linear here. What is unique for Faerch is that we're the only ones that can bring this material back into new food packaging. It is very much a start of the journey, but you can imagine 106 billion pieces of plastics in Europe every year. And we have 24 billion of these. It comes with a great responsibility. And we're very much aware that we are a part of the problem. We can't accept that. We need to be a part of the solution. And with our 20% market share, if we are not pulling our load, who's going to do it then? What about the rest of the 80%? It is definitely a pioneering journey for Faerch. We are the first ones to do this, but we are definitely also calling for collaboration here. It's a call to action. Everyone needs to contribute here.
How does it work then with the recycling? Can you explain a little bit more about the process?
How does it come back?
Yeah.
Because it's very intuitive how plastic bottles come back, especially in Norway or the Nordic countries. You go and you return the pant. But how does the food packaging come back?
That's where it gets tricky, right? Because if you buy, for example, minced meat in the supermarket, the tray that minced meat is, it might be from us. You better check on the backside. If it has a PET and if it says that it has recycled content in it, it's very likely that it is from us. After you've used it, when you cook, you put it into the waste bin and it goes into your household waste bin and it goes into, well, whatever process is and infrastructure is set in place locally. In the Benelux, we do have our recycling plant in Duven in Holland. We are creating a demand for that PET. We're going into technicalities here, but PET is the same material as that is in plastic bottles, high quality plastic. And it's a shame if that goes to incineration and landfill, which is the case today, or even worse, out in the nature. So with our recycling plant, we are creating a demand for that waste fraction. In the Benelux area, we're taking that household waste into our plant. We're taking it through decontamination processes, whatever is needed in order to bring it back to food grade. And I think that's the main highlight of what we did last year, is to ramp up our capacity. We tripled our capacity and we can now take around 60,000 tons of waste to our plants. That's the full capacity in terms of volume. And now we're looking to scale, right? Across Europe, because obviously 106 billion pieces needs to come back in our view.
I have 3 kids, so I have a lot of plastic that's coming from the food. In Norway, there is an area for like separating out plastic and recycling in plastic, something that would work in that white clear plastic bag.
We can take whatever PET household waste you have. So what we need is also regulation that caters for that.
Okay, we can also talk about the regulatory. Are you saying that a lot of the plastic is not PET? Is it only Faerch that is doing the recycling PET? Because you guys have 20% of the market, so the other 80% doesn't have a recycling possibility?
Yeah, we're not only producing PET, we're also producing PP, polypropylene, and also polystyrene. We have a clear strategy to move out of polystyrene because our view is that recycling should be circular. The material that comes out of the recycling process should be used for like. Food packaging should become food packaging again. For example, if you use it for food packaging, perhaps if you recycle it, can only be used for different purposes like park bench or whatever. So that's more downcycling. In terms of material conversion, we see that the more uniformity you can have on the plastics on the market, the more volumes you would get for recycling. Monomaterials, not mixing up different types of plastics into the product, but also more uniformity in terms of plastic sources will definitely help in terms of increasing the circularity in the food packaging market.
I'm just guessing here, but does it make the recycling process easier if you do it that way, or does it make it more complicated?
Well, for us, the more PET that is in the waste stream, if the PET is viewed as a valuable material fraction, it will be taken care of. If it comes back through household waste and it gets sorted out because it has a value, then we're onto something here. In fact, we know that the value chain is broken because the moment it leaves our factory, we lose control of it. So what we do, we can't control the food tray when it goes to the retailer or the food packer or the retailer and gets sold to the consumer, but we can control the demand for having it back. So that's what we're trying to create here. We think that obviously if someone is asking for that waste fraction, then someone will take care of it.
From Faerch's perspective, this sounds like a huge operation and time-consuming and resource-intensive. What was the main driver behind this? Was it the regulatory pressure, or was it always the plan to move towards a more sustainable business model?
This is one of the things that I thought was very, very intriguing when I started speaking to the CEO of Faerch, because they started putting recycled plastics into the products, almost sneaking it in, because it was the right thing to do. Building this recycling capacity, it was also to take responsibility for your own product. It's the only responsible thing to do. I think everyone can agree that there's a limit for how much plastic the world needs. And to have high quality products living for only 8 days, it really doesn't make sense. For Faerch and also for our owners, AP Møller Holding invested in Faerch or bought Faerch because of the recycling capacity. It is our crown jewel. It is the enabler for everything that we do in terms of making sure that our product is circular. A lot of the PET out there also encouraged by regulation, right? That the bottle comes back. There's no such luxury on food trays. As recyclers, we don't want to steal from the bottlers because that is a loop that works on its own. We need to create our own loop on food trays. That's what we're trying to do. We have started. We are taking our part of this and responsibility in this, but we're also seeing that there's a number of items out there that are still not being recycled. We can only cater for 60,000 tons, right?
And is that on an annual basis or?
Yeah, fully ramped up on an annual basis.
Yeah.
How is the collaboration or discussions with other manufacturers? The 80% don't necessarily have built-in recycling or recycled material. Is that correct?
We are constantly talking also to competition because we seriously think that the industry needs to change. It is a bit of a painful journey because the plastics industry is very fragmented. We know that we are the biggest player within our segment. So yes, we see it as our responsibility to pull the load here. There's a lot of things that needs to come together. Regulation also needs to support this. You have numerous of regulatory to sort of get on top of in terms of seeing what will come in order to gear our business. And I think this is also something that our competitors are constantly watching in terms of how are we sure that we have future-proofed our business in terms of material use. We're definitely seeing regulation as a positive. Plastic taxes and regulation is an accelerator for a harmonized material flow and more responsible resource use. For us, it has also been a bit of an education journey because we are doing something for the first time. We're pioneering something. We're doing something that nobody else is doing. We're taking household waste, recycling it back into food-grade product. And I think the old truth out there is that cannot be done.
But it can.
But it can. Since 2018, we've been doing it. And now we can do it on an industrial scale. And we're super proud of that.
Yeah, and I feel like more people should know about this. I feel like the next time I buy meat, I should look at the packaging and see the difference. And that can be a competitive advantage that I know that actually the plastic that I'm buying has a chance to be recycled. And I think creating a demand around that with bottles too. And yeah, I think there's a great opportunity, but it is very difficult. A lot of investment and time to create this. Can you tell us a little bit about the strategy for the company forward? Are you looking to build more of these plants?
More people should know about this. It's the best kept secret in the world, I feel. But that's also why I joined the company. I was hired to increase the visibility of basically not necessarily for marketing purposes. It's just telling what we do because it needs to come out there in terms of us creating an infrastructure around it. Yes, we have established one plant now that can cater for 60,000 tons. But we are planning on tenfold upscaling that very, very quickly, actually. We are constantly monitoring where to put our next plants. But of course, we cannot build a plant until we know that we have the feedstock. And the feedstock influenced in terms of the material flows that goes into recycling plants from extended producer responsibility schemes or any kind of local regulatory environment as well. So it is a tricky thing. We need to talk to a lot of stakeholders in order to make sure that we're investing on the right places. But obviously, we need a critical volume in order to build the plant. But it is the absolute commitment from Faerch and also from our owners, AP Møller, to stand behind this in order to make sure that we take responsibility for our products.
Super interesting. Just in terms of managing this, how do you do this and stay on top of the regulations? How is sustainability managed within your company?
This is very tricky because you have EU regulations, you have the packaging waste regulative, you have single-use plastic directive, waste management directives. There's a lot of directives to get educated on. Also, at no single point in time has there been more new regulation being written as well. So for us to be present in the right forums in order to talk about what we can do, in order to not see the regulation being counterproductive for the recycling efforts that we're trying to do, is a big job. To be completely honest with you, I think at this point, not say that we're fully staffed for that magnitude of messaging that we need to do. We're trying to be here and there and everywhere, but it is quite time consuming, and sometimes we feel that it's a bit frustrating as well when we see regulation being imposed that is actually hindering us for putting in place our circular processes.
You mentioned that you guys have around 20% of this market share all around Europe. Can you tell a bit about the difference between facilitating such recycling processes and the difference between different countries? Is it easier in the Nordics compared to the rest of Europe?
Every country has its own regulation that we need to adhere to. It's very hard to interpret trends on where it's going, even though the Nordics has come quite a far way. For example, we saw some taxes in Sweden coming in, or whether it's being discussed or whether it's imposed, I'm not 100% sure. And it's focused on basically opaque plastics or colored plastics. Yes. Because the old truth is that colored plastics cannot be recycled, or colored PET cannot be recycled. But guess what? We're already doing that. Yeah. So when we're taking that waste into our factories, or into our factory in Duven, we do not add any color to it. The color that comes out is the result of the waste coming in. So whether it's blue and yellow, perhaps the tray comes out as green, but it's still green, still colored, and then it gets this tax. So when we're selling that colored recycled product, it can be up to 99% recycled plastics. That tray, when we're selling that to our customers, they get taxed on it.
Oh my gosh.
And it's happened in Sweden and also in Belgium, and it's a bit frustrating. But then again, it's up to us to come out and tell our story into what we can do.
Educating on the changes in technology. People are making regulations based off of old information or old data points.
But I do think that regulation and taxes in general, we're welcoming that because it gets us to a harmonized world. And I think it's all very well intended. But the education job for us doing something pioneering, sometimes it can feel a bit like we're running behind the bus.
Yeah, I know how.
Because it's very hard to monitor everything at the same time.
So many moving pieces and so many uncertainties around that.
With all these intensive operations, there's a lot that you need to measure, I assume. How do you guys do that?
There is no way to measure progress as you know where you're starting from. Collecting that data and knowing what your baseline is has obviously been a very important part of our journey here. We just issued our sustainability report. It is online. Please go read. 85% of our emissions are Scope 3. Our products out in use with our customers and consumers. What we are trying to do is obviously to monitor the progress here in terms of material conversion. A key metrics for us is the Faerch circularity ratio. How much circular material are we putting into our products? Out of all the products that we put on the market, it's only 3 billion pieces out of those 24. So there's a job to do for us.
How are you collecting this data? Because the volume of the people that use your product, it's insanely large. Do you have some centralized system, or do you collaborate together with your customers to collect the data?
It's a massive job internally for us. I must give large credit to the ESG team and also the finance team. No function collects data better than finance, right? In terms of measuring progress. It has been a massive exercise that has been quite linked between those two functions. How do we measure it? We know what we put on the market and we know how much we recycle. We have no idea whether that is our own tray or whether it's someone else's tray, but it is at least the same material. Our end goal here, the North Star for us, is to, yes, we are recycling to cover our own demand, of course. So if we can get to 100% or be neutral on what we put on the market, that's fantastic. But if we recycle more than we put on the market, that's even better. It's not necessarily just going into neutrality, it's going into positive territory here. It's a win-win for us. It's also a win-win for our customers because we are impacting our own emission or our own footprint by doing that. But we can also help our customers reducing their footprint.
And with a 20% market share, I would say the whole continent.
Well, there is the rest of the 80%.
And I think if you have a leader such as Faerch that is doing so much, in the long run, it sets the industry standard for how you should handle recycling in such a sensitive industry when it comes to plastic.
advantage and challenges as being a first mover, as you said, just in terms of education and doing something that hasn't really been done before in this industry.
And I think what you're pointing to there is super important in terms of, yes, we are taking responsibility now. We're leading the way. But I think we're quite humble for the fact that we can't be circular alone. We need partnerships around us. We are definitely calling for collaboration with our competitors, with waste management, with retailers, food packers and food producers, trying at least. Talking to the consumer is quite difficult as we are a B2B company, but I think there's so much confusion out there. As a consumer, how can you ever know that you're making a conscious choice?
Exactly.
Or the right choice? Obviously, you're not choosing the food you're buying because of the packaging.
Absolutely. But oftentimes each individual wants to know what can they do themselves. They feel powerless. They can't change the corporation. But I could look at packaging and say, I want to have the one that has the least amount of footprint. How would they know then? Like if you were to look, if I'm going to go to the store tonight and look, is there something like just the recycling sign on the back of the packaging for Faerch?
In very few instances, you have labeling on the front of the package. That's my dream.
Yeah.
That you as a consumer can see it right away, that it's not hidden away on the back. To find out what you're buying, yes, you need to turn it around and then you need to look for the triangle. And if it has a 1 in it and it says PET.
I've seen that actually. Now that I remember, I see that, especially on the meat packages. It looks like some arrows going in triangle.
Yep.
So if it says 1, it's okay. And if it says another number, it's not okay.
No, not necessarily. But for PET, today and through us, that is the only food trade material that can be circular.
Why isn't it being put on the front of the product? I assume the government would have an incentive to do that.
We're seeing actually that our customers are contacting us more and more. One of our products is called Evolve, and the Evolve product is made out of recycled content material coming out of the recycling plant that we have in Duven. That material, it has its own logo, so it's almost like an ingredient brand that and we see that our customers are contacting us in order to make sure that that comes on the front of the packaging. Yes, please feel free to put it there. And I think going forward, my dream would be that it's seen more and more on the packaging, so we as consumers can know what we're buying.
I love that. It's great to see such initiatives already being in place.
The education that Elisabet is saying, it's just in our day-to-day lives. The more that we're educated, the more that we can kind of make a conscious choice. A lot of people want to do the right thing. It's like, how do you do it and how do you know about it? That's just a really interesting challenge in itself in terms of getting the message out.
I'm just wondering, if there's so much initiatives towards a more sustainable food packaging, why not just switch to paper instead of plastic?
Yeah, and I'm not here to say that paper packaging is not the right answer, but I think it depends. It's hard to imagine the food packaging industry without plastics because the plastic keeps the food safe while it travels, and the food travels more than we do. I don't think it makes sense to ship, for example, blueberries from New Zealand or Spain or whatever it's come from to Norway in paper packaging because it is also about increased shelf time of the product. And food waste is obviously a huge emitter globally. So for food safety reasons and to keep the product shelf time longer, it's hard to imagine that it should travel in something else than plastic. But to me, plastic is a wonderful material because of those attributes. The problem happens after use. What do we do with it? That's where it all goes wrong. That's where the infrastructure is totally broken.
And that's the issue that you're trying to fix. How do you ensure that once it's being used, it can be reused? A lot of people just think, oh, plastic is bad. Plastic can be recycled, but there's not necessarily the infrastructure yet there to do that for all of it.
Plastic packaging, when it's used responsibly, it can play a crucial role in reducing food waste. It's important to remember.
Yeah, exactly. It's not black and white.
We're doing plastic rigid food packaging. That's what we do. For paper packaging, I will leave that with competition, but obviously it's always worth asking the question, will this material be used for a long time? 8 days for food packaging, that's not acceptable. That needs to change. So it needs to be recycled. It is the same for the paper industry because if we're cutting down trees, it shouldn't also live only for 8 days. We should think about perhaps alternative use for wood. Everything should be living more than 8 days, I guess. That's
No, exactly. And I think it could be okay with paper, but I just think about like minced meat or things like that. I can't imagine what else we would use right now instead of plastic. Somebody's trying to create something there too. But in the meantime, also, what do we do with the existing structure and how best to mitigate the impact from that?
One thing that really upsets me is when we're mixing materials, when we're mixing paper and plastics. Why do we do that? Or why are we mixing different kinds of plastics? because it makes it so hard to recycle. And it can never go back to like-for-like use after you've done that. Perhaps there's chemical recycling method that can cater for it, but that's also very costly. So packaging in general, we should be very, very conscious of the resources that we use and make it as simple as possible, design it as simple as possible in order to reuse or recycle for that matter.
But is it maybe a cost benefit to mixing them?
Maybe people are not thinking so much about the recycling aspect. They're maybe looking at the design or cost at that point, because they're just thinking about maybe the short term and not the eventual consequences of it. A lot to think about, and then just the impact of some small decisions that you make, and you don't realize the after effect of it. So I wanted to move the topic a little bit. What is really interesting about Faerch is how you've integrated sustainability directly into the company's mission and the way it works. But can you give some advice to other companies who may be just starting this journey?
What I've learned both from previous employment and now in Faerch is that sustainability is not a topic or a trend or a function, but it's a mindset, it's a way of doing and being, and having sustainability, the initiatives done on that part as an integral part of your strategy definitely helps everyone's attention in a company. Everyone is responsible for making the company more responsible and more sustainable. That is one way of starting it, and the tone comes from the top. The CEO sets the agenda, and the board also needs to acknowledge if you, as a board and a CEO, are not taking sustainability into consideration when you're setting your strategy, you're not future-proofing your business. One of the common misperceptions about ESG and ESG initiatives is that it's a compromise on profits. But I think the world that I've been living in, it has been the enabler for long-term sustainable profits. So it has been a journey.
Yeah, it definitely helps with the tone at the top coming from the executive level. You had mentioned in another conversation about your journey around double materiality. Could you share a little bit more about the process and how you did it within Faerch and some of the results from that?
We've just come out of having done the double materiality assessment, and obviously it is in terms of preparing ourselves for the CSRD reporting that would be quite elaborate. I just need to applaud. Yes, it's very time consuming. It is a big animal and there's a lot of change that needs to be done. And I'm conscious of the fact that it's tying up a lot of resources, but I think for the right reasons. Discussions that we've had internally, because it's been anchored across the company in order to get the expert advice for us to focus on the right topics. And the discussions we've had has increased awareness around risks, for sure, in terms of making sure that we put in place measures. And some measures we have already, but it's about making a structure around it and systemizing it. It is quite a big confirmation to us that this is a great opportunity for the company. When we're looking at the risks and opportunity picture, it does come out as more of an opportunity for us.
And I love that, because I do think that sometimes ESG is focused as a risk. How do you mitigate the risk? The double materiality and CSRD, there's a whole opportunity side that I think companies are missing or are not focusing much about. And I think this is a really great opportunity for companies to look at the positive side that ESG can drive in the business and the mission, and also bring the employees, customers, suppliers, everybody along with this change. All right, we're going to go into the rapid fire questions right now.
I'll begin with the first one. Elisabet, can you tell us one word to describe the future of ESG?
Strategic.
What is the biggest misconception about ESG?
That ESG initiatives is a compromise on profit.
And your go-to metric for ESG success?
Well, I need to say the Faerch circularity ratio. How much circular content are we putting into our products? And of course, emission tracking.
What is your biggest challenge in ESG implementation?
Data collection and harmonizing and influencing policymakers.
Can you tell us the most underrated aspect of ESG?
That it's a profit opportunity. It is a sustainable profit opportunity.
ESG in one sentence.
It's not a function, topic, or a trend. It's a mindset. It's a way of thinking, being, and doing.
Why is ESG implementation more important than ESG reporting?
Well, doing is better than talking. If you don't know your starting point, you don't know where to prioritize, and you cannot measure progress if you don't know where you are. So thank you, data, for putting all that in place.
Perfect. Elisabet, thank you so much for joining us. It was a delight to talk to you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to all our listeners for your support so far. If you like this episode, we will highly appreciate you rating it 5 stars to help increase the reach of ESG in practice.
And if you want to be notified when our next episode drops, please hit the follow button.